The air crackled with unspoken accusations, the scent of burning embers sharp in my nostrils. He stood across the ravaged garden, my younger brother, Thomas, his face a mask of cold indifference, as the last flames danced and flickered, consuming everything I held dear. He smiled, a cruel, dismissive curve of his lips, while I choked on the smoke and the bitter realization that this was not an accident, not a tragedy, but a calculated act of war. They thought they had broken me with this single devastating blow. They were wrong. They had only lit the fuse. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, subscribe now. Join us, and let's navigate the tangled web of sibling bonds together. My name is Sarah, and up until that moment, I would have walked through fire for my family. Thomas, my younger brother, had always been difficult. Competitive, perhaps, but I had always chalked it up to sibling rivalry, the kind that fades with age. We grew up in a modest home, but our parents instilled in us the importance of family, of supporting each other, of being there through thick and thin. I was the older sister, the responsible one, the one who always looked out for him. I helped him with his homework, defended him from bullies, and even lent him money when he was struggling in college, never expecting anything in return. My life wasn't perfect, but it was built on a foundation of love and loyalty, a foundation that was about to crumble. I poured my heart and soul into raising my daughter Lily. Being a single mom was hard, but Lily was my world, my reason for everything. Thomas, on the other hand, seemed to sail through life, always landing on his feet. He married young to a woman named Clara, and they quickly started a family. Their son, Ethan, was the apple of their eye, and they made sure everyone knew it. The first crack in our relationship appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly. It started with missed phone calls, declined invitations, and a general sense of distance. I wrote it off as the busyness of life, the demands of a growing family. But then came the graduation invitations. Ethan was graduating from elementary school, a milestone that Clara and Thomas were celebrating with a lavish party. I received an invitation, of course, but there was something off about it. The wording seemed formal, almost impersonal. And then came the phone call. It was Thomas, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. He started with small talk, asking about work and Lily, but I could sense the tension building. Finally, he cleared his throat and dropped the bomb. "Look, Sarah," he said, "we've been thinking about the graduation party and, well, we've decided to keep it small, immediate family only." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "So Lily and I are not invited?" There was a pause, a beat of silence that felt like an eternity.
"It's not that, Sarah," he stammered. "It's just that, well, Ethan's graduation is a big deal for us, and we want to keep the focus on him. We don't want any distractions." Distractions. That's what he called my daughter. I swallowed hard, trying to process the words. "So, my daughter isn't important enough to attend your child's graduation?" I asked, the words laced with a pain I couldn't hide. His reply was swift and callous. "Exactly." The phone went dead, the dial tone of mocking echo in my ear. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of his words crushing me. My own brother, the one I had always protected, the one I had always loved, was now actively excluding my daughter. The pain was a physical ache, a burning in my chest that threatened to consume me. That night, sleep evaded me. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation in my head, each word a fresh wound. How could he do this? How could he treat Lily, my sweet, innocent Lily, as if she were some kind of inconvenience? I thought of all the sacrifices I had made for my family, all the times I had put their needs before my own. And for what? To be dismissed? To be treated like an outsider? The next day, I tried to talk to him, to reason with him, to understand what had changed. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't answer. I sent him text messages, pouring out my heart, begging him to reconsider. But my words were met with silence. Clara, his wife, was no better. She blocked me on social media and refused to speak to me when I saw her at the grocery store. It was as if I had suddenly become invisible, a ghost in their lives. Desperation clawed at me. I decided to go to their house, hoping to catch him alone, to force a conversation. but when I arrived, the atmosphere was icy. Clara answered the door, her eyes narrowed with hostility. "What do you want, Sarah?" she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "I need to talk to Thomas," I said, trying to remain calm. "He doesn't want to talk to you," she replied, blocking the doorway. "This is a private family matter, and you're not part of it." I pushed past her, determined to find my brother, but he was nowhere to be seen. Clara's voice rose, her anger escalating. "Get out of my house, Sarah. You're not welcome here." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. I recoiled, shocked by her aggression. "What has gotten into you? We're family," I exclaimed, my voice trembling. "Not anymore," she hissed, shoving me towards the door. "You're nothing to us." As I stumbled out of their house, tears streamed down my face. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My family, the people I had always counted on, had turned against me. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of betrayal. Lily noticed my distress, her young eyes filled with concern. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice small and hesitant.
I tried to reassure her, to shield her from the truth, but I couldn't hide my pain. "It's okay, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Mommy's just a little tired." But Lily wasn't fooled. She wrapped her arms around me, her small body trembling. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Her love was the only thing keeping me afloat, the only light in the darkness that had enveloped me. But even that light was threatened. One evening, I received a letter in the mail. It was a formal legal document, a notice of a lawsuit. Thomas and Clara were suing me for defamation. They claimed that I had been spreading lies about them, damaging their reputation. The accusations were absurd, completely unfounded, but the lawsuit was real, and the implications were terrifying. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I barely had enough money to make ends meet. The thought of fighting a legal battle against my own brother was unbearable. I felt trapped, cornered, like a wounded animal with nowhere to run. They were systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece. My family, my reputation, my financial security, all were under attack. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning. Their ultimate goal was to isolate me, to break me, to leave me with nothing. And as I sat there, staring at the lawsuit, a spark of defiance ignited within me. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me, but they were wrong. They had underestimated my strength, my resolve. They had awakened a force they never knew existed, and they were about to learn, in the most painful way possible, that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I would not be a victim. I would not let them destroy me. I would fight back, and I would make them pay for what they had done. The lawsuit was the final straw. It wasn't just the money, though the thought of legal fees sent a fresh wave of panic through me. It was the sheer audacity, the cold-blooded calculation of it all. They weren't just excluding me, they were actively trying to destroy me. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, the lawsuit documents blurring in the dim light of my bedside lamp. Every accusation felt like a physical blow, each legal term a fresh wave of nausea. The faces of Thomas and Clara swam before my eyes, their smiles twisted into cruel, mocking grins. How could they do this? What had I ever done to deserve such hatred? I lost my appetite. Food turned to ash in my mouth. I forced myself to eat for Lily's sake, but every bite was a struggle. My clothes hung loosely on my frame, a stark reminder of the weight I was losing, both physically and emotionally. Work became a torturous exercise in concentration. I struggled to focus, my mind constantly drifting back to the lawsuit, to the betrayal, to the crushing weight of despair. My boss noticed my declining performance, his brow furrowed with concern. He asked if I was okay, if there was anything he could do to help. I forced a smile and told him I was just going through a rough patch, that things would get better. But inside, I knew that things were only going to get worse. One afternoon, I came home to find Lily sitting on the porch, her face streaked with tears. "Mommy," she cried, running to me. "The kids at school are saying mean things about you. They said your brother is suing you and that you're a liar." My heart shattered into a million pieces. They were attacking my child now, dragging her into their twisted game. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting Lily, about shielding her from the venomous reach of Thomas and Clara. That night, I reached my breaking point. I stood on the edge of the abyss, the darkness beckoning, the weight of the world crushing me. The thought of just giving up, of ending it all, was a tempting escape. But then I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her bed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. And I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave her alone, vulnerable to the cruelty of the world. I had to fight. I had to protect her, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. The despair hadn't completely vanished, but it was tempered with a cold, unwavering resolve. I was done being a victim. I was done feeling sorry for myself. It was time to fight back, to turn the tables on Thomas and Clara. I started by researching the law, spending hours at the library, poring over legal documents, trying to understand the intricacies of defamation law. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but I could arm myself with knowledge. I learned about the burden of proof, the elements of a defamation claim, the defenses that were available to me. The more I learned, the more confident I became. I realized that their case was weak, based on flimsy evidence and malicious intent. They were counting on me being intimidated, on me backing down and admitting guilt, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I started documenting everything, every interaction with Thomas and Clara, every phone call, every text message, every email. I knew that evidence would be crucial in defending myself against their false accusations. I also started reaching out to people who knew Thomas and Clara, people who might have information that could help me. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was determined to uncover the truth, to expose their lies. As I delved deeper into their lives, I began to see a pattern, a history of deceit and manipulation. They had a knack for twisting the truth, for portraying themselves as victims, for exploiting the vulnerabilities of others. I realized that I wasn't the first person they had targeted, and I probably wouldn't be the last. The more I learned, the angrier I became. But my anger wasn't a blind rage. It was a cold, calculated fury. I wouldn't let them see my emotions, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they were getting to me. Instead, I channeled my anger into planning, into strategizing, into preparing for the battle ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They had money, they had connections, they had a willingness to lie and manipulate. But I had something they didn't, the truth, and I was determined to expose it, no matter the cost. The victim was gone. In her place stood a strategist, a warrior, ready to fight for what was right. The game had changed, and Thomas and Clara were about to learn that they had made a very grave mistake. I became a ghost in my own life, observing Thomas and Clara from the shadows. I needed information, solid evidence that I could use to dismantle their carefully constructed facade. I started small, creating fake social media profiles to monitor their online activity. I learned their routines, their habits, their friends. I discovered that Clara had a secret online shopping addiction, racking up thousands of dollars in debt without Thomas's knowledge. I also found evidence of Thomas's gambling problem, a habit he had managed to keep hidden from everyone. These were minor indiscretions, but they were cracks in their armor, vulnerabilities that I could exploit. But I needed more, something concrete that would expose their true nature. That's when I decided to focus on their finances. I knew that Thomas had been involved in some shady business dealings in the past, whispers of insider trading and tax fraud. I started digging through public records, searching for any evidence of illegal activity. It was like navigating a labyrinth, sifting through mountains of documents, chasing dead ends. But I refused to give up. I spent weeks hunched over my computer, fueled by caffeine and a burning desire for justice. One evening, I stumbled upon a series of transactions that caught my eye. They were complex, involving offshore accounts and shell corporations. But I could see a pattern, a deliberate attempt to hide money from the IRS. I downloaded the documents, my heart pounding with excitement. This was it, the smoking gun that would bring them down.
But I knew that simply handing over the documents to the authorities wouldn't be enough. Thomas and Clara were skilled manipulators. They would find a way to explain it away, to twist the truth in their favor. I needed to present the evidence in a way that was undeniable, that would leave no room for doubt. That's when I decided to consult with a forensic accountant, someone who could decipher the complex financial data and present it in a clear, concise manner. I found a retired accountant named Mr. Abernathy, a man with a reputation for integrity and a keen eye for detail. I met him at a small coffee shop, my hands trembling as I handed him the documents. He examined them carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration.
After a few minutes, he looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and concern. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. "These transactions are highly suspicious, and I believe they constitute a clear case of tax evasion." He agreed to help me, to analyze the data and prepare a report that I could present to the authorities. But he warned me that it would be a long and arduous process, and that there was no guarantee of success. I told him that I was prepared to do whatever it took, that I wouldn't rest until Thomas and Clara were brought to justice. As I continued my investigation, I knew I had to be careful. Thomas and Clara were becoming increasingly suspicious, sensing that something was amiss. They started monitoring my phone calls, my emails, my social media activity. I had to be one step ahead of them, to conceal my activities and protect my sources. I installed encrypted messaging apps on my phone, used a VPN to mask my IP address, and created a separate email account for my communications. It was like living in a spy movie, constantly looking over my shoulder, anticipating their next move. One afternoon, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, a sense of dread washing over me. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Sarah?" a voice said on the other end. It was Thomas, his tone cold and menacing. "We know what you're up to," he said. "We know you're digging into our finances. I would advise you to stop, for your own good." I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. They knew. They were watching me. I had to be even more careful, to protect myself and Lily from their wrath. I installed security cameras around my house, changed the locks on my doors, and started carrying pepper spray for self-defense. I even considered moving, but I knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. I had to stand my ground, to face them head-on. The weeks that followed were a constant game of cat and mouse, a dangerous dance between hunter and prey. I continued to gather evidence, meticulously documenting every transaction, every conversation, every interaction. I shared my findings with Mr. Abernathy, who was diligently preparing his report. We worked in secret, meeting at odd hours, communicating through encrypted channels, always aware that we were being watched. As the day of reckoning drew closer, the tension became almost unbearable. I knew that exposing Thomas and Clara would have devastating consequences, not only for them, but for our entire family. But I also knew that I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. They had betrayed me. They had attacked my daughter. They had tried to destroy my life, and I was determined to make them pay. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered a hidden camera in my house. Thomas and Clara had planted it, hoping to catch me doing something incriminating, to use it against them in their lawsuit. But they had underestimated my vigilance. I found the camera, disabled it, and downloaded the footage. It was a treasure trove of information, revealing their plans, their motivations, their lies. I added the footage to my growing collection of evidence, knowing that it would be the final nail in their coffin. The plan was set. The pieces were in place. The stage was set for the final act, and I was ready to unleash my revenge. The hidden camera footage revealed everything. Hours of Thomas and Clara plotting, scheming, their faces twisted with malice as they discussed ways to ruin me. It was all there, irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. But the most damning revelation was their plan to take Lily away from me. They had been secretly contacting Child Protective Services, making false accusations of neglect and abuse. Their goal was to gain custody of Lily, to isolate me completely, to leave me with absolutely nothing. That was the moment my blood turned to ice. The lawsuit was one thing, the financial attacks another. But to threaten my child? That crossed a line they could never uncross. My rage was a living thing, a consuming fire that threatened to incinerate everything in its path. But I couldn't let it consume me. I had to control it, to channel it into a precise, calculated strike.
The footage also revealed their arrogance, their unwavering belief that they were untouchable. They openly mocked me, dismissing me as weak and pathetic. They laughed about how easily they had manipulated me, how they had turned our family against me. Their hubris was their weakness, their Achilles heel. They believed they were smarter than everyone else, that they could get away with anything, and that's exactly what would bring them down. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. They would deny everything, twist the truth, and try to turn the situation against me. I needed to expose them publicly to reveal their true nature to the world. I decided to create a website, a platform where I could share all the evidence I had gathered. I uploaded the financial documents, the hidden camera footage, the text messages, the emails, everything that proved their guilt. I wrote a detailed account of their abuse, their lies, their betrayals. I laid it all bare, exposing their dark secrets to the light of day. But I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted to make them suffer. I wanted them to experience the same pain and humiliation they had inflicted on me. I knew that their reputation was everything to them. They craved the approval of others. They needed to be seen as successful and respectable. So I decided to target their image, to shatter their carefully constructed facade. I sent anonymous tips to local news outlets, alerting them to the website and the evidence it contained. I knew that the media would be eager to sink their teeth into a juicy scandal, especially one involving wealthy and influential figures.
I also contacted the IRS, providing them with the financial documents that proved Thomas's tax evasion. I knew that the government wouldn't hesitate to pursue a case of tax fraud, especially when it involved offshore accounts and shell corporations. I sat back and waited, watching as the trap slowly closed around them. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a mixture of excitement and dread. I knew that once the truth came out, there would be no turning back. Their lives would be forever changed, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do. They had brought this upon themselves. They had chosen to betray me, and they had to face the consequences of their actions. The first domino fell when the local news station ran a story about the website and the allegations against Thomas and Clara. The story quickly went viral, spreading like wildfire across social media. People were outraged, disgusted by their behavior. The comments section of the news website was flooded with messages of support for me and condemnation for Thomas and Clara. Then, the IRS announced that they were launching an investigation into Thomas's finances. The news sent shockwaves through the community, sending Thomas and Clara into a panic. They tried to deny the allegations, to dismiss the website as a fabrication, but the evidence was overwhelming, the truth undeniable. Their lives were crumbling around them, their world collapsing. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. They were finally getting what they deserved. But the final act was yet to come. I had one last card to play, a trump card that would ensure their complete and utter destruction. I knew that Thomas was planning to run for public office. He had always dreamed of being a politician, of wielding power and influence. I also knew that he had a secret, a dark secret that he had been desperately trying to keep hidden. Years ago, before he married Clara, Thomas had been involved in a scandal involving another woman. It was a messy affair, filled with lies and betrayals. The woman had threatened to expose him, but Thomas had managed to silence her, using his wealth and influence to make her disappear. I had stumbled upon evidence of this affair years ago, but I had never done anything with it. I had always believed that it was in the past, that it was not relevant to my current situation. But now I realized that it was the perfect weapon to use against him. If I could expose his past, if I could reveal his true character to the public, his political aspirations would be shattered, his reputation ruined forever. I tracked down the woman, who had been living under an assumed name in a different state. It took weeks of searching, but eventually I found her. I contacted her, told her everything that had happened, and asked for her help. At first, she was hesitant, afraid of the consequences. But eventually, I convinced her that it was time to tell the truth, to expose Thomas for who he really was. She agreed to come forward, to share her story with the world. We arranged a press conference, inviting all the major news outlets. The day of the press conference arrived, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment of truth. As Thomas desperately tried to do damage control and lie to everyone around him, I sat back and waited to unleash the final blow. with my hand on the detonator. The press conference was a maelstrom of flashing lights and frantic questions. The woman, her voice trembling but resolute, recounted her story, detailing Thomas's manipulative behavior and the lengths he went to keep her silent. She presented emails, voicemails, and even a signed confession Thomas had coerced her into writing years ago, all confirming her account. As she spoke, I watched Thomas on the live stream, his face contorting with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Clara stood beside him, her expression a mask of stunned horror. The carefully constructed image they had cultivated for so long was crumbling before their eyes. The reporters pounced, firing questions at Thomas, demanding answers. He stammered, denied, and tried to deflect, but his words rang hollow. The truth was out, and there was no containing it. The news spread like wildfire. Thomas's political ambitions evaporated in an instant. His colleagues deserted him, his friends disowned him, and his supporters vanished. Clara, devastated by his betrayal and the exposure of her own secrets, filed for divorce. The lawsuits against me were dropped, the accusations exposed as pala as they were. The IRS investigation intensified, leading to a mountain of charges. The world that Thomas and Clara had built, the world of wealth, power, and prestige, came crashing down around them. They lost everything: their money, their status, their friends, and their family. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their actions. In the aftermath, I focused on rebuilding my life. I spent time with Lily, showering her with love and attention. We moved to a new house, a safe haven, where we could start fresh. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and family, people who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. I started a new business, pursuing my passions and creating a life that was fulfilling and meaningful. I healed. The scars remained, a reminder of the pain I had endured, but they no longer defined me. I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Seeing Thomas and Clara's downfall, their complete and utter ruin, brought a sense of closure, a feeling that justice had been served. But it didn't bring me joy. It didn't fill the void they had created in my life. It simply marked the end of a chapter, a painful chapter that I was finally ready to close. I watched as they were taken away, their faces etched with despair.
They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.